Good morning. It's March 17th, 2022. Welcome to Triggered. I'm Corey Morgan. I should start. Happy St. Patrick's Day, that annual observance of overindulgence. I'm not wearing green today as it kind of works poorly in environments that have green screens in the background. Green tie would make me a little transparent, and I already look odd enough as it is. So this is the Western Standard's daily live show. We come to you from 11:30 a.m. Mountain Standard Time every day, Monday to Friday, and cover the news, talk to interesting guests, and I get a lot of ranting out of my system, so I don't have to keep bothering Jane with it all the time. Comments, they're welcome. That's part of this show being live. You know, we want to hear from you guys. We want you guys to interact with each other somewhat politely. I mean, hey, we can be a little, it is triggered. We can be a little high strung, but we still got to keep things somewhat civil. And I'll try and dedicate some comments and questions to guests when I can. I certainly do. So, and I got a number of guests today. It's a pretty packed show. I've got Koleya Karrington she's the CEO of Absolute Combustion, and she's been managing getting ready on this upcoming Alberta Technology symposium, and it's a big one happening in Calgary with a lot of events. And as we're starting to recover the economy, actually, these sorts of things are going to be pretty important. So it should be a good talk. Then I'm going to have our new Western Standard Ottawa Parliamentary reporter, Matt Horwood, coming on. And we'll talk about a few of the stories he's recently written and what he's going to be covering in the future and what's coming up. And then right towards the later part of the show, we're going to have UCP MLA now, Brian Jean, coming on. And he's going to talk about his plans now that the by-election's behind him. And he's moving into a very strange legislature right now when we have Brian Jean coming in and not exactly well endeared with the leader of the party. So it's going to be an interesting relationship to see what goes there. So let's talk briefly about St. Patrick's Day. I see a few people wishing say happy St. Pat's, LJ and Darlene and a bunch of others. You know, Lorraine, you're all celebrating St. Patrick's Day today. I'm dry these days, but I can still observe it and look at it now. Today's a day, though, that bartenders look forward to with trepidation and dread. I mean, while copious drinking comes with pretty much every observance in the Western world, whether it's Christmas or Halloween, St. Patrick's Day is the only one where the primary goal of celebrants is to get as wasted as possible, and most often in a pub environment. Now, as a former bartender and pub owner, I remember it all too well. Only shifts involving Mother's Day brunch would instill as much anticipatory fear into hospitality workers as St. Pat's does. Anybody who's done any brunch service before on those sorts of days, though, knows what I'm talking about there. And it's not drunkenness, it's just sort of a Karen's collective that makes your life suck. That said, it is a lucrative day for bartenders, servers, pub owners. January and February are dire, slow months in the hospitality industry. St. Pat's marks the end of the winter doldrums. Most people have managed to knock down their Christmas credit card bills. The days are getting longer, the weather's getting warmer, and they're ready to cut loose. This year, I expect the crowds are going to be bigger than we've seen in years. The mask mandates are gone, the capacity limits are gone, the vaccine passports are gone, and people are pent up. They want to have a good time for a change, and they're going to head out for it tonight. I'm going to read a set of rules from a person who I considered something of an inspiration to me while I was in the bar business. He goes by the Angry Bartender, he even has his branded bar tools and wear, and rest assured I could relate with many of his workplace observances. Those who had the honor of being 86th by me when I owned that bar can understand why I like this guy and why Angry Bartender works for not just himself, but it was applied to me quite often. So the Angry Bartender issued 10 rules for participants to head out for St. Pat's, and they're well worth reading, though they rarely are read by people. So let's get into these tips for you guys before you head out tonight. Rule number 1, don't be a dick to the bartender. I know, it sounds like a simple one, but it happens all too often. Remember, the bartender is the arbiter of whether or not your night's going to go well. Piss them off, and your punishments can range from being as minor as slowing your drink service to whispering into the ear of that girl at the end of the bar that you've been trying to pick up that you've been known to have social diseases. Or perhaps that bartender can snap their fingers and have the bouncer remove you. Those fates are all easy to avoid. Just don't be a dick. You'll have a good time. Rule number 2, don't drive. Seriously. Stop being cheap. Take a cab, an Uber, or arrange a ride. It's not that hard, and yes, you can actually literally avoid killing somebody. We want to serve people and facilitate their good times, not create weapons on the road. Rule number 3, don't puke in the sink, in the urinal, under the table, or pretty much anywhere. If you can't avoid puking, you're still not grown up enough to go out to the bar no matter what your ID says. Just don't do it. Rule number 4 is somewhat related to rule number 3. If you aren't a regular drinker, St. Pat's doesn't mean you have to try and keep up with the rest of us. We'll happily pour a de-alcoholized beer into a pint glass, a Coke into a highball glass, or some ginger ale into a wine glass for you if you want to keep up appearances. It could save you from having a bad night. Hey, if you're not a hardcore drinker, don't try to drink hardcore, especially tonight. It's not the night for it. Ease into it, have a good time. Rule 5, don't you effing dare order a margarita. Just don't effing do it. Rule 6, seriously, if you order a margarita, I will wish doom upon you. We're packed, and I don't have time for it. Rule 7, related to the other 2 rules, stick to the basics. Don't ask 100 questions when there's 143 other people waiting for a drink. Think about what you want, know what you want, and clearly express what you want when you get to me. If you hum and haw, I will shout over you and take the next order. Rule 8, I will punch you if you even say the word margarita. Rule 9, tip the bartender. We are all literally dying inside. And I can relate with that. This is the angry man that it turned me into. Rule 10, ask me to chill your Jameson. Go ahead, I dare you to. Do it, and I'll shame you in front of your peers. God intended Jameson to be enjoyed warm. Why else would it be warm? That's it. That's all. Oh, aside from that, even if it's not St. Patrick's, don't ever ask me to mix scotch with something. I'm just going to give you rye. Now follow those simple rules, and you're assured to have a good night, as will those who are working their butts off to serve you. Share them with your friends as you take your cab to the bar tonight. Share those rules, spread it out. Everybody's going to have a good time. Now, while the actual Irish don't tend to celebrate St. Pat's as everybody out here does, they have the good grace not to whine about it. They can celebrate and be happy for folks having a good time, and you never have to hear the words cultural appropriation out of them. Now get out there tonight and have a good time. Happy St. Patrick's Day, you animals. I haven't had a drink in years, but I'll be vicariously enjoying the night through your indulgences. So do it right and do it safely. All right, let's check into the newsroom for some non-St. Pat's news, and that's with Mel Risden. Hey, Mel, how's it going?
Good. Is a Bellini okay? Can I get away with ordering a Bellini?
You missed that rule about keeping it simple, eh?
I might have,
well.
but I've never been classified as a simple kind of girl. So.
Yes.
And I was also going to say you should have worn green. It would have been interesting with a green tie. You would have had like a big hole through you from the green screen. It would have been interesting.
Some people would like to see that, or even just a few little holes. But
all right. So yeah, we're working on lots of stories as usual. We just put out a story on a city councillor, Councillor Wyness, who has put out a tweet yesterday evening. Basically, it's a public apology, and this is based on a call that she put out on Monday, asking city councillors to hold some form of a public forum to sort of give a voice to the freedom protesters in the Beltline. She took a lot of flack from some of the other councillors in the council chambers, and so she put out the statement yesterday apologizing for any offense, because her tweet actually had a statement saying she wanted to see this public forum similar to what was offered to BLM protesters in 2020. So there were people that took offense to sort of her finding some sort of a, not necessarily a link, but equating them. So that is on the website. We've got a story along the lines of Bank of Canada has been found to be storing prohibited firearms. They're long barrel firearms that have sort of recently been determined to be prohibited, and so basically their security officers are unable to use these weapons to defend the premises when it comes to Bank of Canada. So that's proving to be a bit of an issue. We've got a column from our Dave Makachuk, US and Canada in a race to protect the Arctic frontier. This obviously coming from the war that's been happening and raging between Russia and Ukraine. So just I think in a preparatory way of trying to decide whether what Russia's next moves might be. So that's why they seem to be doing some activity in the Arctic. Ottawa has announced an end to pre-arrival testing for ththose fully vaxxed. So that is going to definitely save some money for a lot of travelers. However, UCP have voted down the Fed's public health air travel restrictions, basically condemning their proof of vaccination and testing requirements to fly. Alberta's Health Minister Jason Copping says it's time for the government to catch up to the evidence. We've got a story out. BC has launched a review of its COVID response, but there are some caveats. They will not be including decisions made by the government or the provincial health officer in the review. So I'm not sure what else there would be to review when it comes to the COVID response in that province, but we've got more information on that on the website. We have another column up from Mike Thomas on the anti-protesters in the Beltline. So these would be the protesters that are protesting the actual freedom marchers. A lot of city council don't like these people to be referred to as anti-protesters. They are residents in the community, but Mike speaks to this in his column as he does live in the Beltline. So I think he can, speak to his experience. So we've got that on the website, and we've got a couple of things coming up too. Calgary Police Commission is asking for public opinion on the Beltline protests and what's been sort of going on in that area for, months and months on end. They're asking for the public's opinion. We'll have that up on the website and how people can submit that very shortly here. And also looking at a story where the Welsh are looking to cancel the history of the Welsh steam trains because they say they're linked to the slave trade. So that will also be up on the website very shortly.
Yeah, there's no shortage of crazy things to report on. And you know, that coverage from local news and City Hall on these protests and the double standard, has just been driving me bananas. I'm glad you didn't say it. I know you wouldn't have, but I was listening on the radio this morning, and they refer to the freedom protesters as the so-called freedom protesters. They put that in front of it every time they mention it. I never heard them talk about the so-called Idle No More or the so-called BLM protesters or the so-called Occupy protesters. They just called them what they were. It doesn't mean you agree with them. You're just calling them what they are. But we're seeing that slanted mainstream media where they pick a side in a conflict and they subtly or sometimes not so subtly show that.
Well, and I think the tough thing, especially for Councillor Winus, that put out the request on Monday that council offer this public forum, and I don't know that she was necessarily saying it would be a public forum strictly for the freedom protesters, but also a public forum to allow residents to come and share their concerns about what's been happening in their community. I think what she was trying to do was, by the sounds of it, open dialogue, say we need to listen to each other. We need to, whoever feels unheard needs to be heard. And, I think her coming out with the apology was politically appropriate. And I'm not, I'm not making a judgment on it per se, but I think the idea to come together and speak about these things and to hear one another is what she was getting at. And so it's unfortunate that it was turned into something that I don't think it was or what she meant it to be. But that is unfortunate because I think, hearing people and having conversation and dialogue around these things would definitely be helpful.
Absolutely. There's just not been enough rational dialogue on this whole affair in general. Well, thanks for checking in. Lots to look forward to as usual, and appreciate that work, Melanie, and we will talk to you a little later.
All right. Thanks, Corey.
Hey, thanks. So, yeah, getting back to that, I tell you, in the Calgary City Council, we see that with city councils all over, they're exceedingly woke. They're exceedingly insane. And this hornet's nest, these guys are making Nenshi look rational in comparison so far. I am going to have a Calgary councillor, Dan McLean, on tomorrow. He's one of the few who seems to at least be trying to inject a little bit of common sense into that mess. But, they're new and they're learning lessons. And the one thing Miss Winus is going to find out is the worst thing you can do is apologize to the mob. She bent over and apologized. You're ruined. They own you now. Anytime you tick them off, you will be on your heels. And it's funny because she's one of the progressive ones. They've considered it controversial for a councillor to even propose listening to the different sides of the conflict. And that is really problematic. That is a failure in leadership and governing. You don't have to agree with them, but you should listen to them. And I said it before too, when that imbecile Prime Minister Trudeau dealt with the Ottawa protests by doing nothing but inflame them and insult them and shoot at them, he caused a lot of the standoff and the vitriol that happened on Parliament Hill over those weeks. If he'd have just been respectful, it would have been so much easier to deal with what was going on up there, but it just was not within consideration to him. You couldn't even talk about talking with them. Again, it doesn't mean you capitulate. It doesn't mean you give in to demands, but at least listen to them. They're your constituents, whether it's federally, whether it's civic. And in Calgary, we've got, I think, quite an ugly showdown that's going to come this Saturday. And we've got council members fighting amongst each other. We've got people ramping up the rhetoric. And, the stuff we saw in the Beltline before, I'm afraid is going to get much worse. Getting onto the woke, one of the stories that Melanie said is going to be coming up pretty soon. And one of our reporters, Amanda Brown, mentioned it in that classic English style. She called it, I think, woke wankers. But this is how ridiculous we get as well. We were talking about a Welsh steam train exhibit. And I guess at some point, somewhere, some steam engines had actually transported slaves. Thus, we can't even celebrate the steam engine any longer. I hate to tell some people, but boats were used with slaves. So maybe do we have to ban boats? Chains. They were awful ugly symbols. It's fine, but we use them for a lot of contemporary uses as well. But now that they're symbols, do we have to ban those as well? I heard they wore clothes. Maybe we should ban clothing. They're insane. They are insane. What are our museums going to get down to when we can't even have a steam engine in one? They still never managed to cease to astound me. I think I've seen it all. I think they can't shock me anymore, and they managed to outdo themselves. Good work, you clowns. Oh, where do you go? And getting back to those sorts of clowns, just before I get on to my next guest, and I'm going to talk about a sponsor quickly, but the CGL pipeline, we've got a new lineup of idiot Hollywood morons, and that's what they are, talking about Canada and why we should shut down a pipeline that's 3/4 built, that is approved by each and every First Nations band along the pipeline right away, because they want to feel good about themselves. They sit in their mansions in Hollywood. They burn 10 times the resources and fuel of everyone else. They want to make themselves feel a little better by shutting down a pipeline that won't impact them directly because it's somewhere way up north where all those, snow Mexicans live. And that list of celebrities who should just stick to doing what they do in Hollywood, Scarlett Johansson, Amy Schumer, potato face there, Leonardo DiCaprio, Ben Stiller, and all sorts of others signed this campaign, and they got a mandate to have the Royal Bank of Canada stop the financing of the Canadian Coastal GasLink pipeline. Right now, we're in the world energy crisis. We can't export our liquid natural gas to a world that's desperate for it, and these peckerheads want to shut down a pipeline to try and get the one and only LNG plant we may ever actually get operating within Canada. And unfortunately, people listen to these guys. Like, the only reason you should be listening to these idiots is when you're watching one of their movies. When they start talking politics, tune them out, guys. You're not going to get anything good out of them. Now, before I get to the guest, I do want to remind everybody, as we saw from Melanie, we've got a lot of news items going on. We've got new reporters. I'm going to speak in one today. We constantly have things breaking. Make sure you take out a membership with the Western Standard. This is how your subscription keeps us being independent, so we can talk about these stories. We can do these things. We don't take any government subsidies. We actually qualify for some now. We will not take them. But that does mean we need you guys to help out. And for a free 2-week trial, it's risk-free. Check it out. Sign up. And after 2 weeks, if you think it's well worth it, for that $10 a month, you can keep it going. And 95% of the people who take the trial out do. You can get a newsletter. It'll deliver every morning, let you know what's breaking, what's going on around here. And if you use that code TRIGGERED, coupon code TRIGGERED, you get another $10 off. That'll give you 10 miles of driving worth in a car or something, fuel these days. You want to save money right now. It's tight. So check it out. It's a good deal. Take out a subscription, and we do appreciate those who've already subscribed. I'm going to speak briefly of one of our sponsors too, because that's how it keeps us rolling, and that's the Canada Shooting Sports Association. These guys have been a great sponsor for us for quite some time now, and their name says what they are. They're an association for people who want to responsibly, legally, safely use firearms, which is what 99% of us do. Whether you want to trade, Well, yeah, if you want to trade them with other responsible owners, whether you want to target shoot, whether you want to hunt, it's your business, it's your property. But the liberals are coming after it all the time. They are changing the categorizations and they're stealing your property. Oh, they say they'll buy it back. Hey, when they take it without your permission, it's still stealing. The Canada Shooting Sports Association has legal challenges out on your behalf as a firearms owner against the Liberal government to stop this. But they can't do it, of course, like everything else without your help. You've got to stand up for yourself. Get out to their website, Google it, Canada Shooting Sports Association, and you can take out a membership with them, and that helps them so they can, of course, keep standing up for you. Their website's cssa-cila.org, and hey, it's well worth it, as is subscribing with us. Okay, enough babbling out of me. Let's bring our first guest in today, and that's, I hope I'm not going to mispronounce it. Looks not too bad. Koleya Karrington. She's the CEO of Absolute Combustion, and she was going to talk about the upcoming Alberta Technology symposium. Hey, how's it going?
Good, thank you. How are you?
Very good, thanks. Glad to have you come in. Looks like quite an event that's coming up in the future here that you guys are promoting and planning. And as we're moving towards economic recovery, they're covering a whole lot of subjects that are going to be pretty important out here.
Yes, absolutely. So one of the key factors to promoting this economic recovery is showing that we have a diverse industry. Our technology sector is one of the key things that support our major resource sectors, which is energy and agriculture, logistics, et cetera. So what we want to showcase and highlight is all the incredible companies that are here in Alberta that are working towards supporting our energy sector and all these other various sectors, and try and get as much awareness as we can for all the amazing things that are happening here in the province.
Yeah, and there's a lot of words, but they're going to need some explanation, even for me and others. Like a big, large part of it right off the start is the Canadian blockchain. And I mean, that's a huge thing. It's growing, this blockchain. But what is blockchain then? Break that down for us Luddites.
So in essence, it really is just a database, right? So a lot of people, they think blockchain, they think it's really tied to cryptocurrency. In some aspects it is, or they get kind of overwhelmed or confused by it. In its essence, it's really just a digital ledger. So with Bitcoin's blockchain specifically, all it is a database that stores send and receive codes. It is complicated if you're looking at doing more of the programming side of things. You need to understand like cryptography and some other aspects to it. For a layman specifically, like if you're interested in the technology, it's a database. It allows multiple different parties to come and see a transparent amount of facts. It has a lot of benefit from the enterprise perspective. If you're looking at doing supply chain, a good example there would be like Walmart in Asia. They put some of their spinach on a blockchain because they wanted to see how this would cut down their food recall times. They took it down from 6 days to 2 seconds because they were able to see the entire supply chain on one database instantaneously versus having to go through multiple companies to figure out where the contaminated good came from. So there's benefits to it, but essence, it's really just a database.
Great. So there'll be people speaking to it at the symposium, I imagine, like to help show those practical applications for these things for attendees. I mean, people run businesses and may not realize that these are things that actually can apply to what their trade is.
Absolutely. So blockchain is going to be a component of it. At our organization, of course, we are a blockchain group, but we look at blockchain as like it's a widget and a tool. So if you're looking at doing like a data transformation within your business, blockchain may be applicable to you, but you might want to be looking at like machine learning or IoT, other technologies as well. So we're kind of showcasing how this is a component to a larger solution when it comes to updating your databases. So when people are going to come and what they're going to learn is, how blockchain, like on the fintech side of things, like if you're looking at doing something like an NFT or you want to incorporate cryptocurrency into your business, what are the legal regulatory implications of that? People are really interested in mining. So we're going to talk about, debunking a lot of the myths on when people think that mining isn't supportive of ESG. Like mining is actually rather environmentally friendly in comparison to some of the other systems out there, like just the energy infrastructure to support traditional banking far exceeds what it looks like in mining, and how that can diversify industries and energy to help them, generate more revenue. Or you're going to talk about, health tech, like how blockchain, machine learning, IoT is supporting people to get better access to data that's going to be able to determine, potential health risks down the road.
Yeah, well, and data is everything these days. We're into this whole new world of everything, and it's developing so fast. It's so critical to keep up. And again, gets to that economic diversity. I mean, Calgary's downtown. I like to think in some senses we have a lot of opportunity. It's unfortunate there's such a massive vacancy in all these buildings down here right now, but a lot of creative ideas can fill those spaces and draw in a lot of new people in the tech sector.
Absolutely. It's one of the fastest growing sectors right now. And part of why we want to support an event like this is because Alberta really is positioned to be that Silicon Valley in Canada. We have one of the fastest growing like blockchain fields. We are third in the world for machine learning. Google put their deep lab here. We have incredible advancements happening in IoT and health tech. So in terms of tech, we are getting a lot of unicorn companies that are spurring up here that are doing incredible raises, like Benevity is a good one, or Neo Financial is a good one. I mean, Skip the Dishes and Uber even started with Calgarians. So we're trying to showcase and attract. We want to make sure that we attract talent to the province, attract, money to the province. We want to be able to, get a lot more government support and leverage it into the technology sector to get people who are interested in starting their business, make sure that they get the funding that they need here, the connections that they need here, be able to commercialize their technology here. So there's a lot of value add to being able to showcase this, because the more people see that we have this incredible and fast growing tech sector, the more we're going to be able to attract value to the province.
Yeah, so something a bit of a side thing, but I like to take questions from the viewers at times. And Bobby has asked, I guess, is the government in partnership with this or with blockchain and things like that? We unfortunately have a lot of government mistrust going on right now. But when it comes to cryptocurrency or things like that in general, they worry that it's government controlled. I think in a lot of these senses, this is a way that you can actually distance yourself from the state control, I believe.
Absolutely. So just, a little on, not to be too controversial, but say in that trucker convoy, traditional fundraising methods that they were going through with like GoFundMe, it was very easy for the government to leverage and block the ability for the truckers to gain access to their money. They eventually moved over towards cryptocurrency to be able to, fund their convoy as they were doing. And there was a misconception from the government that's saying, oh, hey, don't allow for these wallet addresses to gain access to crypto. It's one of the ways that, like, I could have a private wallet. I could create 100 different public access codes. It wouldn't stop me from being able to gain access to the money I need. A really good example in third world countries. So there's places in like Nigeria. Huge protests have been going on for years against a very kind of communist style government regime, where the government has blocked their access to money, canceled their banking accounts, making their life very difficult. They've been doing 100% of their fundraising at this point through Bitcoin and various other cryptocurrencies, because the government cannot control their access to this digital form of money. Even the gentleman that's been running against Putin, he has to raise his funding to try and go become president through cryptocurrency, because Putin cannot block his access to things like Bitcoin.
Great. And then, so some of the other subjects, you got a whole lot packed into this symposium. I noticed the word ag tech in there. We do have a lot of producers and such who are viewers and readers with the Western Standard. So what sort of agricultural tech applications are they going to be talking about or examining in this?
So it's really interesting in the agricultural technology field. Like, ag tech is considered rather traditional, and in some essences similar to the energy sector, slower to move on emerging technologies. But what we've seen is an incredible advancement in, like, a combination of IoT and machine learning, where now they have tractors that are completely autonomous. You can sit there on your pad, your smartphone almost, and watch your tractor be able to do all the things it needs to do in the field, or how they're able to use IoT sensors to depict weather patterns that could potentially support insurance companies giving better insurance rates to the farmers, because they do pay a lot on insurance due to, like, unpredictable weather and potential loss of crops, or how they're able to use different technologies to prove provenance. So there's companies that do birth to burger on blockchain, being able to show, yes, here is this Wagyu cow, be able to show the heritage of that cow, the veterinary records, the feeding patterns, everything, being able to use IoT and RFD, storing it on the blockchain, being able to get a more high value price for their good, because they can prove out, transparently everything that happened with their animals. So there's some really interesting conversations there on how they're leveraging technology to get, better access to funding, make things easier, more efficient, yield more crops.
Yeah, the day of the small subsistence farm is long gone. I mean, aside from hobbyists, I mean, nowadays it's a business and it's important. And anywhere you can help reduce those or expand your margins a little bit helps, especially now with the cost of inputs going up. You mentioned IoT a number of times. That's Internet of Things.
Yeah, so it really is a very broad term when you come into to IoT. Basically, like your smartphone is an IoT device. What you're using right now to broadcast this is again Internet of Things. So basically, it's like a form of a tangible hardware piece that ties in with software that connects into the internet that allows you to see in real time potentially like what's happening all around the world, what's happening on your farm and what's happening on your oil and gas plants, remote monitoring of sites, so you don't have to use personnel to go and check different things. So that's kind of like IoT. To me, it ties into absolutely everything. If people are looking at like blockchain technology, it's like you kind of need IoT. You need to be able to capture that data to be able to store it on blockchain. So it's always that kind of like first step.
All right. And then one of the other areas covered was health tech, and that's going to be a big growing area. I'm hoping actually coming out of this pandemic, that gets a little broader, and I won't throw that curveball, but we get some healthcare reform in general and treatment options and things. But health tech is another area where we could, I guess, develop more options as well, and whether it's pharmaceutical or I guess mechanical and robotic even.
Well, so one of the things that I would really love to see in the health technology field is that self-sovereignty and ownership of your own health data. So right now, if you go between your chiropractor, your dentist, your doctor, all of these different people, they essentially own the data that you're giving with them, and there isn't a consistent messaging. So your dentist isn't sharing information with your doctor, and your chiropractor isn't sharing information with your dentist and your doctor. And your body, you need to kind of look at it holistically, like all parts of you. So if you're going to be able to like through blockchain right now, what they're looking at is being able to have this ownership and access to your data where it's a compiled database. Your doctors can feed information into it, but you are the one who determines who has access. So in terms of data and technology, it's where people are making their money. It's how Google makes their money or Amazon makes their money. It's selling your data, and your health data is also being kind of sold. Essentially, if you want to travel anywhere across Canada, if you have a medical issue, you would like a doctor to be able to see everything that's happened with you, to be able to understand exactly like what could be going on with you now, better diagnosis. So those kind of things are coming up. Or I've seen companies in Calgary who have developed, if anyone's familiar with Star Wars, kind of the essential of like tricorder, where it's like a personal device that can be able to kind of determine what's going on with your body. Those things are kind of interesting, or how they're kind of mobilizing healthcare, or using machine learning to be able to aggregate a lot of data together to have better predictive analysis of, what you could be suffering with. So a lot of times you go to the doctor, you have an issue, the doctor is guessing at what your problem is. If he had an incredible amount of data and be able to determine, exactly what's going on with you, you'd probably be able to diagnose things like cancer earlier or tumors earlier, different things like that.
Yeah, well, in diagnosis, early diagnosis is so critically important, particularly in things such as cancer. I mean, a lot of those are fairly treatable if we can get them early enough. But if you wait too long, and that's part of the problems we have with our system, is long waiting times. Sometimes you're beyond treatment by the time you find out what's going on.
It'd be nice to have privatized healthcare, to be honest. I mean,
That's a different discussion, but I'm with you. So going further with that, so this is coming up fairly soon, and it's being held in Calgary.
Yes, so we're hosting it at the Grand Theatre. I really quite love the Grand Theatre, specifically because it's a really interesting, unique kind of venue to do it. It's like a performing arts venue. So everything we do, we want to try and support local as much as we can. So it's a beautiful place to come see. We're going to be providing coffee and donuts throughout the day. We're providing lunch. We have an amazing gala. We do love to support and do charitable give back. So this year at our gala, we're doing a fundraiser for the Glenrose Foundation. They're part of Alberta Health Services. And what we're so excited about is it's the first foundation of its type to accept donations in cryptocurrency. So we actually have a surprise for them at the event, with one company doing a big donation for them coming up right before the gala starts. And then great food, great networking. A lot of the people that we attract are like executives, ministers, academics. So it's a really good kind of networking mix and crowd. And you get a lot of kind of like thought leadership that's coming from it as well. So great learning, great networking opportunity.
Yeah, it's quite a guest list of presenters and speakers that are going to be attending this event as well over the course of 2 days.
It's pretty much, we try to attract some of the premier talent to really kind of showcase. So a lot of times if people aren't aware, they can't really advocate for the sector. And it's a great opportunity to be able to like raise that awareness. We're excited. We have people coming from all across the country to join in on this. Jeff Booth is going to be our keynote. We're excited to have Danielle Smith as our mistress of ceremonies. We have companies like Adibotics and Bitcoin Well and Memory Express. We have Prairie Scan, which formerly was Western Economic Diversification, supporting the event, and Alberta IoT, API Industries, Meta Equity, BLG, McLeod Law, Innovate Edmonton, Platform Calgary. So it's like the economic development, government, leading groups in industry, amazing thought leaders, funding as well. Where we have Startup TNT coming with Jade Alberts and Meta Equity to talk about like how they're supporting, and they've done, I think, well over $1 million in funding for startups to help get them off the ground. So there's a lot of really exciting topics that are going to be meaningful for anyone at any stage of their business.
Great. So what is the date of this event, and where can they find more information about it?
So it's happening on April 20th and 21st. And if you come to our website at canadablockchain.ca, you'll see a tab for the tech symposium, or you can check out albertatechsymposium.com as well. Either one will bring you right to it. But if you come to canadablockchain.ca, you'll be able to see like our magazines and a lot of other great content. And we do free education with our group every month as well. We host webinars. We get engaged in a lot of research projects. So if you want to learn more, there you go. There's the website. It's a perfect place to come for everything.
Okay. Well, yeah, Nico's great at picking those things up and put them up there for us and our viewers. Well, thank you very much for coming on today and explaining as much as you could in 15 minutes on what's obviously a very large and diverse event. We're looking forward to seeing it happen, and I hope we can talk to you again soon.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Great. Thanks. So yes, that was Koleya Karrington. And that was on the upcoming Alberta Technology Symposium. So, oh boy, here we come, the WEF people. Okay. We've talked about the World Economic Forum. I've done rants on it. I've covered it. There's a video, actually, that thing really took off, 80,000 views the other week or whatever. It exists. I'm not denying it. Schwab has some crazy plans he wants to do with the world. Some political leaders are listening to those guys. Absolutely. But their conspiracy isn't as deep as a lot of people think it is, okay? And I know some people are saying, well, all of this blockchain and sharing information and such, that this is going to get us controlled. It's going to get us taken over. You got a phone? Well, then they're already tracking you guys. You're on the internet. You're watching this show. Don't worry. They're tracking you. They can find you. You want to control. I'm not talking about the WEF. I'm talking about the state in general. And things like digital currencies and that, they aren't perfect, but I tell you what, and I know somebody's telling me they're run by the CIA. And guys, I don't know. I can't help you. If you want to move in the woods and live completely without tech, of course, that's your option. I believe in full freedom. But as long as you have tech, there is going to be some degree of data sharing, and it's going to happen. You want to limit it as much as possible. You want to value your privacy and things like that. Of course you do. But we can't avoid it. And these tools are very valuable for us. When we're talking about things like ag tech and digital currencies and uses that businesses can have to track supply and such, these are good, efficient things. So don't dismiss everything, just out of hand, out of fear of some of the worst players out there, I guess, on the world stage and things such as that. There's a lot of good happening out there as well. And that was brought up recently. One of the people that are going to be at this symposium, and it is coincidental, but it's Bitcoin Well. They're going to be represented there, and they are one of our sponsors. So let's talk about them. Let's talk about digital currencies and something the guest mentioned. The government came for our funds. I mean, they certainly did. The central banks, the government regulated banks, happily cooperated with the government to go after people who dared to donate to the convoy. If people had their funds in a cold wallet, and these are the things that can be explained by Bitcoin Well, the government can't get at it. It's a standalone piece of hardware, and it will have your assets in it. That's how that works. It is out of their reach. It's in your control. It's in your hands. It is the coins under your bed, or whatever way you want to put it. And these guys will explain how that works. That's what they're all about. Bitcoin Well, they're a Western Canadian company. They're out here. They're publicly traded. You can talk one-on-one with people. That's one of their hallmarks of service, is that they will consult with you and make sure you're comfortable with what you're doing. They never handle your money. It gets sent directly to you, and you always handle it. And they show you how it all works. They're, an educational company almost. And if they can't, if in Calgary, Montreal, Edmonton, Winnipeg, you can go one-on-one. Anywhere else in Canada, you can get a Zoom meeting back and forth. These guys offer a great service if you're interested in getting into digital currencies, and they're worth looking at, and they've been a fantastic sponsor for us. I'll talk a little more about them again later. So, yeah, interesting times though. And again, it's Bitcoin's part of the Great Reset. Yeah, everything's part of the Great Reset. So, yeah, just looking more at the news from that replica of the steam-powered locomotive in Wales, though, just to get back to the later stuff. It's the National Museum. Pulled it out. Let's see. It was used in the first steam-powered rail journey all the way in 1804. I mean, this is steam travel. I mean, this was a very big development in the Industrial Revolution and the world moving forward and things like that. I think it kind of predated the full Industrial Revolution. This is as much as it's laughable, it's also worrisome. I mean, that's how seriously revisionist our areas are getting. Our government institutions, our museums, our things like that. We were seeing that in Canada, and in the archives, the federal government archives, where they're wiping out entire swaths of information because some of it might be offensive to some people. Or we got the Museum of Woke out in the West Coast, I think, that is taking out a whole bunch of parts of Canadian history because they don't want to hurt people's feelings. It's got to stop, guys. We have to document our history, even with the warts, and be able to look at these things and talk about these things. It's critical. And so these woke things, we laugh at how absurd and how ridiculous they're getting, but at the same time, it is pretty serious as well. So that story has also been posted, just so you know, at the westernstandardonline.com. Dave just gave me a heads up there to remind me of it. So get onto the westernstandardonline.com and you can see more of those rather than me paraphrasing these stories as they come out. Some of the other stuff that's coming up before our guest comes up. This is, from Blacklock's reporter. These guys come up with a lot of great stuff, and I believe Dave's going to be writing more on it, or one of them. This troubling is the term they use for electric car rebates, and they remain the costliest climate program of them all, and they were all pretty bloody expensive. But there was an Ottawa think tank that used figures from transport, the Department of Transport, showing taxpayers' subsidies are the equivalent of $700 or more per ton of emissions saved. Like, the money being blown on this, and these programs are costly and inefficient. It's from the MacDonald Laurier Institute. I've had some of their members on as guests before. Actually, we'll see maybe if I can get somebody to follow up on that in the coming days here. But it's saying the government needs to rethink the subsidies they're offering for purchasing electric vehicles. I mean, we saw how outrageous and ridiculous it was down in the States with some of them, including President Biden, saying, "Hey, if the gas prices are too high, just go on out there and buy an electric car. It's easy. It'll save you money." It's ridiculous. And it shows how elitist those guys are and how disconnected they are. And part of what they point to is, oh, look, it's affordable here. No, it's not. Electric car buyers are, let's see, in Canada, you can get a $5,000 federal rebate, and there's provincial subsidies on top of that. They can go anywhere from $2,500 in Newfoundland to $3,000 in BC and Nova Scotia, or $5,000 in New Brunswick, $8,000 in PEI in Quebec. Hey, wonder where your equalization payments are going? Well, Quebec's using it to subsidize these cars. But subsidized doesn't mean free, guys. It doesn't mean discounted. They're taking that money out of your own wallet and putting it in front of you and then buying something with it. It's not real. It's still your money. And as we see, ironically, this compounds the inflation that leads to more of the energy costs that leaves you poor in the first place. You're not saving anything by going to these machines. But the government won't back off on that. It's good to see some people studying, though, and chewing through the data and releasing those real numbers as we see them. This mad rush to subsidize electric vehicles and try and get people into them is absurd and ridiculous, and it's not doing anybody any good. Let's get real. We're in an energy crisis right now, and electric vehicles aren't our way out of it. I get a good chuckle too. We're just going to transition into renewable sources all over the place, rainbow and butterflies and everything, happy little bunnies hopping around. How are you going to do it? I'm going to be speaking actually to somebody from the Canadian Nuclear Energy Association next week, because nukes, of course, the Greens don't want that either, but that is one of the alternatives we have. Hydroelectric people say, well, okay, But you know what happens every time we try to dam a river? The environmentalists go ballistic and try and block us on that again too. And that's not something you can just build a hydroelectric dam and bring it on stream quickly, if you can manage to even get it approved. Look at what they're going through on Site C Dam in BC. Again, they're delusional. BC, some of those nuts out there want to shut down every possible form of energy generation and don't seem to understand that we can't live without them. But common sense is a rare commodity these days. So, yeah, let's see. Canada cabinet announced for the first time they acknowledged their ban on military assault-style rifles, weapons, including hunting rifles. Includes hunting rifles. Okay, sorry, I'm just trying to phrase that right way. So, I mean, they were always saying these are assault-style weapons we're taking out. They were taking these militarized weapons out of the hands of Canadians. Not that we've had any Canadians using military weapons to shoot anybody. That's not a problem we have. Again, it's the government trying to look like they're doing something, but they aren't. And they're taking hunting rifles. You know, again, people going out robbing places, it's not with grandpa's old duck gun from the basement or a deer rifle or such. They're usually illegal handguns and such that have been smuggled up and things such as that. But they want to go after the legal firearm owners. You want to know why? Because they're low-hanging fruit and they're easy. It doesn't reduce crime, but it makes them feel like they're doing something. Plus, some people with a larger agenda just want to see Canadians not having any firearms whatsoever. And so enforcement of the ban proposed by the Emergency Preparedness Minister is now delayed 18 months amid Indigenous complaints and cost overruns. There's some of the, the state of Canada and the way it goes. I guess we should be thankful for their status in some ways. But when everybody else was furious when they illegalized a whole bunch of relatively harmless firearms, I mean, it's all a matter of what you do with it. But these weren't made for harming people. They were made for hunting. They didn't care when most firearm owners got upset with that until the Indigenous hunters got upset. Suddenly they changed. Suddenly we're going to get an 18-month delay on this, and they're going to reevaluate what they're illegalizing. Good on them for speaking up. It's too bad it takes, different people landing in different racial and ethnic classes before the government will pay attention to some things. But it's for the benefit of all of us that this government can be pushed back a bit. So to allow further time, they're going to amend their amnesty order and extend the expiry date. A ban on, a ban on possession and sale of some 1,500 types of weapons. Supposed to take effect April 30th, now delayed till October 30th, 2023. So there's time to get out of this whole idiotic mess these morons have put us into with going after legal firearm owners. As they say in their thing, what certain firearms have no place in a civil society. These are hunting rifles, you clowns. Yet their own legislation says they're not designed for hunting. Actually, they are, and it's got to stop. So they've pushed it back. And we'll see what happens with this down the road. I don't hold much optimism. I think we got to change the government if we want to get rid of some of those things. I mean, it took that to really get rid of the registry before, which failed. And as well with these grabs, I mean, we don't have a registry. That's what they always wanted a registry for. They always denied it, but that's the truth of it. A registry doesn't stop crime, but it does show them where to take your property when they want to come after it. And now they don't know where they are. There's an old saying, better oil the garden, it's starting to rust. So if they legalize a lot of firearms, a lot of law-abiding firearm owners don't want to become criminals, so they probably would turn them in. But a lot of others would probably just put them elsewhere outside of sight and reach, and that's not necessarily safer. I'll give one quick analogy before I move on to our next guest. I mean, when I started surveying in the oil field, we did a lot of heli-portable projects. I was a young rodman for a surveyor, and we'd be flown out into remote areas and such. And the very start, I was on the tail end of it, but some guys were allowed to actually carry a firearm with them at that time. But there was a lot of procedures and safety rules you had to do with that. You'd had to make sure that pilot saw your empty chamber. You had to make sure there was some things you had to pass and courses so that firearm was properly loaded on the helicopter and properly utilized while you worked. You couldn't keep something chambered while you went along, things like that. Well, then they just said, no, you don't have them anymore. In fact, I had one oil field company that got so ridiculous, you weren't even allowed to have a knife with a blade over 3 inches while you're working in the bush where you're flown in by helicopter in grizzly country. They got rid of all the firearms legally. So what did guys do? Well, we suddenly saw a lot of sawed-off shotguns with pistol grips ending up in guys' backpacks. You saw a lot of handguns going into people's survey kits. And these guys weren't always necessarily properly, that, you know, when it's not in the open, you don't know if they're properly responsibly using these things, because they might have something chambered. You might have a shotgun with a round chambered and the safety off in some idiot's backpack on the storage, the side rail of a helicopter flying out somewhere. This is extremely dangerous. So when they actually went after the proper use of firearms, they actually made things more dangerous for other people. And again, it's the impression of making things look good is more important to a lot of people than the reality of it. Either way, I've ranted enough on that. Let's get on to our next guest, and that is Matthew Horwood. He's our new parliamentary reporter in Ottawa. We had Rachel on the other day, and here's Matthew. Let's see what he's up to out there in the East. He'll be here now. Hey, there you are. I hear you.
How's it going today?
Very good. Thank you. Welcome to the show, and welcome to the Western Standard.
No problem. Good to be here.
Yeah, so you've started just this last week. You're going to be reporting primarily, I imagine, on federal, or I noticed you've already kind of reporting on some foreign affairs, international sort of issues and things in Ottawa in general, I guess, eh?
Yeah, absolutely. Going to be covering mostly federal politics and anything else that comes up that's newsworthy. It's mostly been on the Ukraine crisis in the last couple of days, but yeah, primarily, yeah.
Yeah, so we started, like, your most recent story on that was about some polling done of Canadians in general, and how Canadians felt about taking in Ukrainian refugees over this crisis and war that's happening in Ukraine right now. Can you break down what that was about?
Yeah, it was interesting. A lot of support for any and all measures to support Ukraine, a lot more than before the invasion happened, obviously. But yeah, people are a lot more open towards Ukrainian refugees coming in than they were Syrian refugees. Thankfully, it doesn't look like there's a lot of support for a no-fly zone or direct military action in Ukraine, which is good to see, because I think we all know how that could end up. But yeah, a lot of support for Ukraine.
Yeah. Okay. So I mean, it's somewhat controversial. And then there was Trudeau's response, another story of yours on the no-fly zone and proposals for Ukraine right now. I'm just kind of going through your stories in order here.
Yeah. The Conservative leader, she seemed to be in support of a no-fly zone. She didn't mention that by name, but what she described, which was keeping humanitarian corridors open, sounded a little bit like it. So I'm going to be speaking with some Conservative MPs this afternoon and tomorrow, and get their thoughts on that and what they think about what should be done, whether we should have a no-fly zone, sort of a light version of that. Yeah, that's what I'm going to be publishing tomorrow.
Great. And you'd written something on Patrick Brown as well while you were on things there. I guess you'll have a lot of coverage going on as we get into a federal Conservative race going into the coming months ahead, eh?
Absolutely. So I spoke with Rachel on Monday, and she's going to be primarily covering the Ontario provincial election. I'm going to be looking at the Conservative federal leadership race, but there's going to be a little bit of overlap there. I think there's going to be no shortage of stories to write, and that is why, they hired 2 Ottawa-based reporters.
Great. So, I mean, since I got you there, we got somebody from Ottawa out there. Were you in Ottawa during all the convoy protests and all that kind of insanity last month?
Absolutely, I was. I was sent down there by the Hill Times to cover it on 3 different occasions. And let me tell you, it was really something. Part of the reason why I moved on to the Western Standard was because, I didn't fully agree with how the protests were being covered in the mainstream media. I thought there was a bit too much emphasis on some of the unsavory elements, while few in number, and not a lot of attention paid towards the stories of people who were there and why they were protesting, and some of the nicer things that were happening. The bouncy castles, the barbecues, the patriotic Canadians singing "O Canada," just very different what I saw versus how it was being portrayed.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. We saw that a lot everywhere with some of the larger protests in Calgary. I noted that before with our local coverage from a lot of legacy media. I went to some very large protests that had thousands of people in attendance, and there's a group that always hangs around the fringe of them. There was a handful of them, and they're a little different. I've seen them at protests before. They were out to stir up trouble, and they're carrying some views that most people aren't comfortable with, but they were such a tiny minority. Aside from that, it was such a positive atmosphere But who do we hear about? It's that tiny little group that's making the crazy noise on the corner. And
You're
it's
absolutely
too
right.
bad. It's just not good journalism.
Yeah, for sure. And in any group of more than like 100 people, you're going to get some crazies, some people who are not so nice. You've seen that with some of the other protest movements in the past couple of years. But from when I was there, that was not what I saw. I didn't see any, didn't hear any dog whistles. Just heard a lot of honking. And the Nazi flags that were at the Freedom Convoy protests. One of them wasn't actually even a Nazi flag. It was a Canadian flag. Someone had wrote Trudeau is becoming a Nazi or something to that effect and drew a swastika. So it wasn't even a supporter of Hitler, which was really too bad. But of course it was, spun as all these Nazi flags, Confederate flags everywhere, just a white supremacist movement. But it's, really not what it was from what I saw.
No, it carried further where they got on the case of a Conservative member of Parliament who was photographed, I think interviewed standing in front of. He didn't even know it was waving behind them. And suddenly, I guess, if something waves behind you, you are now responsible for it, even if it was just somebody who was using an odious symbol to make a hyperbolic case against what they felt was Justin Trudeau's actions. Yeah,
that was Michael Cooper. It was ridiculous how he was attacked for that, as if he had any control over what's going on behind him.
Yeah, and I mean, two wrongs don't make a right, but I do know that some people also dug up that there's an incident that happened. Some twit was waving a Nazi flag somewhere around Trudeau at some point in the past as well. And I'm no fan of Justin Trudeau, but I understand that he had nothing to do with the guy waving that flag around him. It's too bad the media and some politicians couldn't extend the same courtesy going elsewhere.
Yeah, exactly. And I spoke to a couple people at the protest that said that when the Nazi flag showed up, he was chased out by the rest of the protesters. They told him, "Look, this is not what we're here for. This is a terrible thing," and basically just told him to leave.
Yeah, and we saw that a lot. I mean, I was watching very closely, as most of Canadians were, when the convoy first started, and there was that Confederate flag that came in shortly and left. I mean, I saw pretty much every blue check on Twitter retweeting that picture of him walking into the crowd, and it made it into mainstream reports. And I don't know how many more times I saw that picture. But there was also a video posted by some people who were in attendance showing that guy being essentially driven out from them, shoved out of the crowd, shown that he wasn't welcome. You never heard that. You didn't see much of that aside from on social media.
Yeah, I hadn't heard of that either, but I'm really not surprised. That lines up with what else I was told about the Confederate flag. Somebody said that that people were saying to a guy who showed up with a Confederate flag, this is wrong. You should not be here. But I wouldn't be surprised if he was chased out.
Yeah, no, and he was, but of course that gets underreported, and it's too bad. I mean, if we want to cover things, I'm going this weekend too. It looks like things are really heating up in Calgary. I'm not so much on the reporting end, but I like to go and observe these things because you got to see for yourself. Unfortunately, you don't necessarily get an unvarnished view of who started what or who did what. And I mean, if I see Freedom Convoy or Freedom protesters, pushing into police or being extreme or shouting anything appropriate, I'll be just as quick to call them out as I will anybody else out. But our legacy media seems to pick a side, unfortunately. I mean, it's all they refer to them now is the so-called freedom protesters. They won't even call them that any longer. It's unfortunate.
Yeah, when I was there on the Saturday right before, as they were getting pushed out, I saw one guy hurl a snowball at a police officer, and the police officer, hit it out of the air, and then he got chased out. Everybody said, leave right now. This is peaceful, and they accosted him for starting, even just throwing a snowball. So it just goes to show how peaceful people were trying to be there the entire time.
Yeah, and unfortunately, with provocation, that can change. We hope that doesn't happen. I mean, the times it's not over yet. I mean, most people, I think the restrictions are dropping. Even it sounds like we got some federal bending on these things now. It is coming to an end, but not fast enough for some protesters. I know there were some kind of side camps. Do you know if there's still elements or plans for protests going on in Ottawa right now, or?
I haven't heard anything recently. I know that a week ago they had the Freedom Chain that was supposed to be a chain stretching across Canada. So I saw a group of maybe 30 protesters at an IKEA when I was there shopping, and they went out and did a small event. But as for any larger movements, I haven't heard anything. I had heard when they initially got chased out of Ottawa that they had set up camps in the smaller townships around Ottawa, but I haven't seen any more reporting on what's going on, how many people have left, how many are sticking around. Not sure about that, but definitely, if the restrictions come back, if there's another variant, God forbid, I think that they will be right back there honking just as much if they can get into Ottawa.
Yeah, there's no doubt if the restrictions if come back, they'll rise up. I mean, part of what I do worry about, I see again with where we seem to almost have more of it out here in Calgary going on, which is kind of ironic because Alberta was the first to get rid of all the regulations and such, but it's a bit of our culture out here and our crabbiness with government in general. But we've got the strongest remnants of existing protest going on, and some of it eventually is going to end up with a shell of people who are just kind of chronically upset with everything, and it's turned into a weekly thing for them to do. And again, with the pressure coming from the police and City Hall to shut them down, this might lead to something more unfortunate. I certainly hope not, though.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, when you protest for that long, it becomes a big part of your identity, and you want to keep it going, even that after maybe the original things you were protesting against have gone and are no longer there. But yeah, hopefully it doesn't turn violent or bloody. And we all know that agent provocateurs are a real thing, and they do happen in protest movements. So let's pray that we don't see anything like that in the future with these movements.
Yeah, so I hope you're enjoying so far the more unrestrained environment of the Western Standard. We're not going to try and pressure people to take one side or another on these things. We just want good coverage, and it's going to be great. We're really looking forward to it. I mean, we've been growing excellently. It's ironic. It's been good for the Western Standard, I guess, as a side effect with the legacy media, unfortunately, really showing such rot that they have from within. Even though there's still a lot of quality people within them, and still some currently, but that whole institution has really gone downhill in a number of ways, but it's been to our benefit. I mean, our subscriptions have gone through the roof, and we're gaining great experienced journalists like yourself and Rachel. So what are you looking forward to, I guess, covering in general? What can we look forward to seeing you writing on in the next couple of weeks or few weeks here coming ahead?
Good question. I'm going to be giving a lot of focus to what's going on with Ukraine. I think that the story around COVID is unfortunately still around. So I'm going to be looking at some of the restrictions, stuff to do with vaccines, stuff to do with the effectiveness of various public health measures I'd like to look into. Also like to take a look at the World Economic Forum, some of the policies proposed by them. I think that's very interesting, and there's been a lot more focus on the Klaus Schwab types in the past couple of years. I think those are stories that people are growing increasingly interested in.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot of, I guess you could almost say, mainstream media no-go zones, but they're still of great interest to a lot of Canadians on the ground and in general. So it's good that we'd be able to dig into those and report on them, whether there's something there or not there. I mean, if we aren't allowing people to check into it in the first place, we're never going to resolve anything.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, there does seem to be a lot of areas that the mainstream media just won't touch. But the people I speak to, the people I see online, that's what they want to hear about. That's what they want us to report on and inform them on. So I think it's good that the Western Standard is a little bit more open and free to let us report on these things and ask the difficult questions that people sometimes don't want to have asked, but which make them, I think, more necessary to be asked in the first place.
That's it. I mean, nobody goes through the amount of schooling, like yourself and others, and then wants to get out there and basically just cut and paste press releases and put out vanilla reporting. You want to dig out there, and that's your passion. That's what you want to get into. So hopefully, we could provide you a lot of opportunity for that, because people don't want to read that tired old stuff anymore either.
Yeah, that's exactly right. They want hard hitting reporting. They want more questions asked. They want not just repeating verbatim press releases and being a mouthpiece for the government. That's not what journalism is supposed to be. No,
not at all. Well, I'm looking forward to watching you guys expanding our coverage out there in Ottawa, where, whether we like it or not, in Calgary, that is the hub of our federal government and where everything goes on. So thanks again for checking in with us today and letting us introduce you to our viewers and listeners. And I'm looking forward to the stories you're bringing in days to come, Matthew.
Thanks, Corey. Looking forward to it as well.
Great, thanks. Okay, so yes, that was Matthew Horwood, and he is the latest reporter with the Western Standard, parliamentary reporter, along with Rachel Emmanuel out there in Ottawa. Some people might have seen through the comment scroll, and I've seen through some messages and email now. It looks like, unfortunately, Brian Jean has canceled on me and won't be coming onto the show today. We'll see if perhaps we can reschedule him down the road. So yeah, because there were a lot of questions I did want to ask Mr. Jean. It's a big thing going on in politics right now. I'm going to talk a little more about that in a minute. Might as well get through our sponsor again. I'm going to speak one more time about Bitcoin Well and what they offer as a service in Alberta, as an Alberta company, well, anywhere in Canada. But I just like that they're locally based. I got my bias there. And they've partnered with Power ED, which is by Athabasca University. Again, this isn't some little basement internet-based company. These guys are well established, and they're partnering with institutions, and they've put together what they call Bitcoin Academy. You can go online, take courses. It's through Athabasca University, and really learn what digital currencies are about and what Bitcoin is, and check those things out. And corporate-wise, I've mentioned that before. If you've got a company and you want to set it up, give your employees an option for something different aside savings, a way to hedge your bets a little bit. We do that here at the Western Standard. It's optional for employees, of course, but Bitcoin Well set us up with that. Every month, a little portion of my check, and it's not a huge check to begin with, but we'll work on it. It's good. We're doing all right here. Goes into my Bitcoin wallet. They set me up with that, and the whole works. And then the Western Standard matches that. It's a nice little perk for employees and a side thing, and lets you save a few bucks on the side. And as I said before, out of reach of the banks and the government and others like that. These guys can set your company up with just that sort of thing. Bitcoinwell.com. And as they say, take control of your money. So, now, again, we'll hope to get Mr. Jean on in the future. So, as people know, he recently won the by-election in Fort McMurray, Lac La Biche. And he's going to be quite a thorn in Premier Kenney's side. Jean's whole campaign essentially was going to be, his whole campaign was based on getting rid of Kenney. I wanted to ask him about a few more policy things because, there's more to it. You're an MLA. It goes beyond that. We understand you have a beef with Jason Kenney. Many, many people do. And they want to change that around. And that's coming with the opportunity probably on April 9th. But what else is going on? And as somebody else brought up, I think that was Cheryl. It went through the comments, scroll too fast. But yes, he invited her. He was saying, why didn't Kenney invite Rachel Notley to the cabinet during the crisis with the pandemic? That's been pretty controversial. How much compromise do you want to do? It's an interesting one. And I guess some of the question to ask is, I know you're trying to get at Premier Kenney. You're trying to show that he was not running things well. But were it Premier Jean at that time? Would Premier Jean really have invited Rachel Notley to come in? To be honest, look at some of the stuff over the course of the pandemic. At some points, Rachel Notley sounded almost unhinged. I'm not sure if she would be a good addition in cabinet. She still would be there as the leader of the opposition, as she should, and still would be digging at the government from the outside. She's got the legislature. She's got a number of things. I think what he's talking about is more, I guess, in the case of a very serious emergency, countries and governments have done wartime cabinets, where you bring in every party. It's that important that you've just got to have everybody together. And often everybody's unified because there's such an emergency going on that they can all work together on a solution and keeping things moving forward. That maybe that's what he was getting at. And I was hoping to ask him to expand a little on that. Again, I'm afraid we won't get that chance today. So we'll see if it comes in the future. Rachel, or no, we got Cheryl. Yeah, AHS, that's a huge area. There's part of our problems. It's a huge bloated bureaucracy, and it's unfortunately full of NDP appointees. It takes a while to flush them out of there. And our whole system in general needs to change, in my view. Cheryl saying nothing good can come when Jean just has revenge on the mind. That's a lot of the question. I've seen a lot of people saying that they really want to remove Jason Kenney as premier. They want him as the head of the UCP, and they're kind of getting on board with Brian Jean with that push. But they don't particularly like Brian Jean himself that much necessarily. There's a couple of things going on. Even if Brian Jean facilitates a new leadership race and Jason Kenney steps aside, it is very far from assured that Brian Jean would win the leadership. Of course, we would see once the race got going. But he certainly made no secret that he would run for it. A good step in running to it, though, would be talking to local independent media outlets so you can expand on what your plans are in campaigns in the future. But if he wants to ignore that, that's fine, too. So what else have we got here? Let's get away from that. The owner of an oil field services company. This was kind of an irony sort of story. And he said higher fuel prices are eating into his profits, and the cost of living is hurting area families. He said it's not just gasoline, it's natural gas, electricity, tires, parts, everything's gone through the roof. Metals doubled. our agricultural and oil field producers are in terrible trouble. So this was Grant Addy, owner of Grant's Oilfield Services Incorporated. He told the Western Standard this. You got to remember the high energy prices, they do great for padding the government coffers and getting the budget balanced, but they do put a lot of pressure on consumers and other businesses all over the place. And even though this is a person who is going to be enjoying busier energy sector times, at the same time, their expenses are flying high. And we're going into some tough economic times. I mean, even if the government can lay off a bit, and that's fine, they've given us some gasoline tax relief, and they're giving some utility bill rebates. But Trudeau, unfortunately, on the other end of things, is going to be slamming us with another increase in the carbon tax. And while oil prices are going up and down, they're not going to be getting relatively expensive anytime soon. So yes, even oil and gas service companies are having trouble with what's going on with the energy sector. So we got to watch with that. And I mean, there's some of the discussion that's going on with we're pretty ticked. You know, we got a world energy crisis. We've shut in Canadian resources so heavily, you know, shut down the Keystone, shut down the Northern Gateway, shut down Energy East, shut down the Mackenzie Valley pipeline, delayed the CGL pipeline for years, delayed the Trans Mountain expansion pipeline for years. Nobody's going to invest a nickel in this country because they know they can't get a damn thing done. And others are saying, well, even if those were going, it wouldn't affect world oil prices. Actually, it would. If you get more on the market, welcome to supply and demand. To some degree, that would come down. Would it be huge? I don't know, but it would be sizable. And we're bound by world prices. Unless we want another national energy program, we wouldn't want to say, well, we produce the oil in Alberta, thus we all get to pay cheaper prices. Now, we do get a degree of that, but most of what happens is it would spur the economy so well that the government could reduce personal taxes. It would help the economy so much that people can afford, to pay for fuel and things like that. That's how it helps, even if it doesn't save you a lot directly at the pump. But you see, we're getting the worst of both right now because we've choked off our ability to ramp up our production and get our stuff out to market, even though we're sitting on some of the hugest deposits on earth. Yet we're still paying all the high fuel prices at home at the same time. The revenue and the royalties from oil and gas right now are good for the government, but they're also maxed out. We've filled every pipe we can. We're running the trains as hard as we can, but we're not hearing any language from the government whatsoever. Nothing from that moron Trudeau or Joe Biden south of the border saying, let's get Keystone going. Let's speed up that Trans Mountain pipeline. And I know some people online get upset every time I say I'm at the point, and I was up to believing it was going to be done earlier. I know a lot of people are working on it and they're trying, but that thing's nowhere close to done. And they're running out of money because nobody can run anything more inefficiently than government. So that thing's been dragged out and stalled and held up, and the costs are going up. And people are saying, don't worry, it's going to get done. I don't believe you. I don't believe you. I am not going to believe a damn thing on that pipe until I see oil go in one end and come out the other. Until then, it's another fairy tale. It's just costing us a whole whack of tax dollars. And I know people are working on it. It doesn't mean it's going to get done. We should be doubling the labor on that thing. We should be screaming at Biden, hey, you geriatric weirdo, approve the bloody Keystone XL. You're out there begging and groveling to Venezuela and Saudi Arabia for oil. We're right here, man. We can help you out. But we aren't doing it. And it's not happening. No, Gorgeous George there saying it's not happening not under the Libs. No, and I don't know if it'll happen under the Conservatives. Because we keep bending over to these environmental lobbyists, to these lunatics, to these extremists. I mean, Prime Minister Harper, he got a number of pipelines approved while he was in, but he didn't change the system altogether that much. He didn't want to get into that battle. It's too hard a battle in this country. Canada's broken in a lot of ways. The problem is with the Conservative governments, they tend to be less bad for the West than Liberal governments, but they aren't often good. That's part of the problem. They aren't necessarily beneficial to us. And we're in a lot of trouble across this country and across the world with energy. What a ridiculous situation to be in when we're sitting on top of resources like this, and we don't have the means to get it market. So, okay, we got... I want to remind everybody again to subscribe to the Western Standard Online. It helps keep us going, helps keep these shows going, and usually our guests show up and we can cover a lot of issues with things and get some good, unique information and content out to you out there. Tomorrow I'm going to be doing a live hit from Franco Terrazzano, actually, with the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. I get him on quite often. He's touring across the country with a new debt clock. They literally ran out of zeros on their last one. That's how far in debt we are. That's how far in the hole we're going. Oh, yeah, and just getting back to the membership there. Use that triggered coupon code when you sign up, and you will save another $10. It's $10 a month. Well worth it. I interrupt myself even. I'm bad that way. So yes, Franco Terrazzano is going to come in. That's going to be live from out in the field. It'll be kind of interesting, not just him sitting at a counter or a desk as he usually is. And Calgary City Councillor Dan McLean. Dan McLean is one of the few who was, I guess, an unapologetic conservative who did manage to get elected into Calgary City Council. I mean, there's really only a handful of councillors who've got some common sense in there, and there are a few of them, and Dan's one of them. And we'll talk about a number of things in City Council, not the least of which is what's going to happen this weekend. Again, we've got some real a conflict building up. The Calgary Police chief, put out a thing recently, basically begging and pleading with people not to come out this weekend, not to go downtown, not to go to the Beltline where these protests are going on. And the counter protesters have said, blow it out your butt. We're showing up there, whatever you tell us. And of course, the regular weekly protesters say we're going as well. So they're going no matter what you say. And when you push back like this, if anything, you're just inflaming it further. And there's a lot of pressure on from the mainstream media, who call it so-called freedom protests, from City Hall, where they listen to idiot councillors like the Courtneys, who claim that it's about racism when it has nothing to do with it. And there is some pressure from residents who are getting tired of the demonstrations. And I got a feeling the police are going to start acting. They're going to start moving in. And I don't know how well it's going to go. I hope it's going to go fairly well. I mean, Ottawa, all things considered, and it was infuriating the way it was done and pushed back. But for moving that large an amount of very dedicated protesters out of an area, the police, at least with we saw the horse stomping that woman down. It was terrible. There was a lot of people got pepper sprayed. That will happen when you got these. Altogether, it was still relatively mild. It wasn't, compared to BLM protests where there was buildings burning and things like that and people getting shot. That went, I guess, as smoothly as you can hope when you get a lot of people getting moved out of an area. Hopefully this weekend in Calgary, it remains calm. And so I'll talk to Councillor McLean, though, and we'll see what we're hearing out of City Council, if they're managing to get anything done. He's also, I think he's on the event center committee. I'm not 100% sure with that. And that's another item, that when Gondek got in, she blew it out of the water shortly after getting in there. Probably had something to do with her weasel in chief, Carter, who didn't last long with her. But maybe Mr. McLean can shed some more light on where things are going there and just City Hall in general and municipal politics in general. I know we got listeners from across the country, but these councillors all kind of push on the same things all over the place. And we could share a lot of the same issues as we cry on each other's shoulders. So thank you all for tuning in today. I am sorry you didn't quite get that chance to talk to Brian Jean. Hopefully we'll get you the opportunity to do that sometime again down the road. We've got a good show lined up tomorrow, and there's always more news breaking and coming out. So y'all have a good night. And as I said, it's St. Patrick's Day. Get out there, enjoy it, have a good time, blow off some steam, but just don't puke in the damn sink or the urinal, will you? Talk to you later.